All right, today we're diving into one of the most daring, most famous heists in modern history. A crime so brilliantly planned it was called perfect. But as you're about to find out, even the most perfect plans can go spectacularly wrong. So let me ask you a question. How do you stop a speeding train with just a glove and a battery? It sounds like the start of a bad joke, right? But believe it or not, this simple little trick was the very first step in what would become known as the crime of the century. Okay, let's paint a picture. It's the middle of the night, August 8th, 1963. Imagine this Royal Mail train just barreling through the dark, speeding from Glasgow down to London. And it's not just carrying letters, it's packed with cash. So the driver, a guy named Jack Mills, he sees something weird up ahead, a red signal. Now, you have to understand, for an experienced driver like him, this was a huge red flag. Literally. He knows this route like the back of his hand, and that signal is never red for the mail train. Something felt off, but he did his job. He stopped the train. And that's exactly what the robbers were counting on. Everything goes quiet. The assistant driver hops out to use the emergency phone on the side of the tracks, but the line's dead. It's been cut. And in that split second, before he can even process what's happening, a gang of men just swarms out of the darkness. The ambush had begun. Now, make no mistake, this was not some random smash and grab. This was a full-blown operation, planned with almost military-like precision for months. This was the big one. So, who was behind all this? The mastermind was a guy named Bruce Reynolds, a pretty big name in the London underworld. He got this incredible tip from an insider at the Royal Mail, a tip about a huge shipment of cash. To pull this thing off, he basically put together a criminal all-star team, more than 15 guys. He even brought in another crew that, get this, had experience robbing trains before. And they had one very specific rule: no guns. But, a good plan is one thing. What happened next was, it was a perfect storm of luck and inside info that was about to turn this from just a big score into the stuff of legend. First up, the intel. This was just pure gold for the robbers. You see, the train was supposed to have this special carriage, the HVV or high-value packages carriage, which was all kitted out with alarms and security. But on this specific day, it was out of service for repairs. So they had to use a dusty old reserve car with, you guessed it, no alarm system whatsoever. The robbers knew they had a clear shot. And if that wasn't lucky enough, here's the second tip, and this one was the real jackpot. Because it had just been a long bank holiday weekend, the train wasn't carrying the usual amount of cash. Oh no. Instead of the typical £300,000, it was loaded with nearly £3 million. That's 10 times the normal amount. Their timing was just unbelievable. All right, so the train is stopped, the crew is taken by surprise, and now the heist begins for real. The clock is ticking, and they have to move fast. I mean, just look at how fast this all went down. We're talking less than 45 minutes from start to finish. They rig the signal, stop the train, uncouple the engine and the cash carriage, drive it a bit further down the tracks to a bridge, and then, poof, gone with the money. But, no plan is perfect. They hit their first major snag. They'd brought their own getaway train driver, a retired guy, but he took one look at the controls of this modern engine and was totally clueless. He couldn't make it move. So, in this crazy, ironic twist, they had to go back to Jack Mills, the guys they just attacked, and force him to drive the train to their rendezvous point. So they get to this spot called Bridego Bridge, and it is all hands on deck. The gang storms the carriage, overpowers the staff inside, and then they form this human chain. Just imagine it, bag after bag of cash being passed down from the bridge to a truck waiting below. In about 15 minutes, they moved 120 mail bags. That's 2.5 tons of money. Just incredible. So they have the cash. We're talking over 60 million pounds in today's money. They've got a hideout all set up 43 kilometers away. It seems like they've pulled it off. The perfect crime. But they made one tiny mistake, and it would unravel everything. Right before they left, one of the robbers turns to the postal workers they tied up and says this. It's a threat, right? Meant to scare them to buy the gang a little more time to get away clean. But here's the thing. That one little sentence was their biggest mistake. It was an accidental gift to the police. Why? Because it gave them a time frame. The investigators immediately did the math. How far can you get in 30 minutes? About 50 kilometers. And just like that, the police had their search area. They knew exactly where to start looking. Meanwhile, the gang is holed up at this remote farmhouse, Leather Slave Farm, and they are celebrating big time. They're so confident, so flush with cash, that they're supposedly playing a game of Monopoly using the actual stolen money. They have no idea the police are already closing in. Yeah, so that confidence didn't last long. The original plan was smart: lay low at the farm for a few days, then torch the place to get rid of every last shred of evidence. But then they hear on their police radio scanner that the cops have a 50-kilometer search radius. Total panic sets in. They ditch the plan, grab what they can, and flee. They'd paid a guy to do the cleanup and burn the farm, but he just pocketed the money and took off without ever lighting a match. And that's when the final nail in the coffin comes. A neighbor who's been noticing all this strange activity at the farm decides to call the police. I'm sure the 10,000-pound reward being offered didn't hurt either. So the police raid the farm, and it's an absolute treasure trove of evidence. Empty mailbags, the truck they used, it's all there. The gang thought they'd wiped the place clean of fingerprints, but they forgot one thing. That Monopoly game they were playing? Yup, it was covered in their fingerprints. It was the smoking gun that linked them directly to the crime. And that was it. That was the breakthrough Scotland Yard was looking for. They ran the prints, got matches to known criminals, and suddenly the net started closing in fast. The most wanted men in Britain were about to be caught. So what happened to everyone? Well, most of the gang got caught and were slapped with 30-year sentences. But here's the really interesting part. The two key people, the insider who gave them the info and the replacement driver who couldn't drive the train, were never ever identified. They just disappeared. And very sadly, the driver, Jack Mills, never really recovered from his injuries and passed away 7 years later. But the story lives on. That bridge is still called Train Robbers Bridge to this day. And that really gets to the heart of this whole story, doesn't it? The plan was brilliant, the score was legendary, but the getaway was a total mess. It really makes you wonder, what makes a crime great? Is it getting away clean? Or is it the sheer audacity of pulling off something that nobody thought was possible in the first place? It's a tough one to answer.